Weirding Way Media.
Night, Mr. Walters.
You see that guy over there? Now, he's an actor. The guy on the phone, he's a prize fighter. Me, I'm a cab driver. I'm the only cab driver in this place.
Good evening and welcome to Night, Mr. Walters, a taxi podcast. I'm HP, your co-host, and with me, as always, is my other co-host, Father Malone. Father Malone, how are you this evening?
Ibida.
See, I thought you were going to go for Adi Phoebe. That's what I thought would have been.
Ada
Phoebe.
Phoebe. Ada Phoebe.
We're talking Taxi Season 2, Episode 13, Latka's Revolting. This was written by Glenn Charles and Les Charles, the Charles boys, the pride of Henderson, Nevada. Back in the director's chair is James Burrows.
Ooh, bring back Weinberger.
I guess they worked out those issues on the associates, probably.
Yeah, they figured out it wasn't going to last.
So a reminder, we're going to do these shows in broadcast order and not in order of filming. We open on the garage. The cabbies are playing poker at their usual spot, and Latka is busy bopping around in the background working on a cab while listening to a radio broadcasting the news in his native language. Hey, side note, the first side note of this episode, according to the official Taxi Fan Guide, Frank Lovey's, the radio broadcaster speaking in Latka speak. Do you know who that is, Father Malone?
No.
It is Judd Hirsch, the radio broadcaster who cuts in and goes, blah, 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 blah. That's
Wow.
Judd Hirsch. That's fantastic.
That's great.
I had no idea. Additional side note before I move on. Latka is listening on this little tiny red transistor radio. Do you remember those, Father Malone? Did you have one of those as a kid?
I did. My older sister had one. All of her friends had one. It seemed like every kid had one.
I had one too. Mine was also red, and it was from Radio Shack. I think they had a brand called Realistic, and there's a little transistor with a little dial on the top that you would pick up. I was sort of swept away by the memory of that radio by seeing Latka listen to it. I wondered if you had the same experience. It sounds like you did.
I was swept away with the notion that I don't ever have to listen to open air terrestrial radio again if I don't need to.
Well, there was a charm to that back then.
But then again, it was the only game in town. So
This is true. At a certain point, there were only 3 networks before cable TV. So life was very much simpler back then. Alex asks Latka about the broadcast, and Latka catches him up on the news of the day in his country. By the way, I really wish we knew what his country's name actually was. We never learn it, but every time I want to make reference to it, I've got to say Latka's home country. Did you find that annoying, Father Malone?
I imagine the writers found it particularly annoying.
Yeah, but they persist. They insist upon it. Suddenly, in the midst of this broadcast, the newsreader, i.e. Judd Hirsch, breaks in, and Latka is sent into a panic. The cabbies all ask him what's going on, and he can only respond that wonderful word, Ada Phoebe, Ada Phoebe. This sends a likewise panicked Jim running out the door, despite not even knowing what the word means.
It was great.
Yeah. Latka explains that it's a revolution. People in his country are taking up arms, and there's fighting in the streets. Alex very properly offers to take Latka home to check on his family. Louis allows it, but only if it counts as a vacation day. So wonderfully soft-hearted Louis lets him go home, but he docks him a day's worth of vacation. This prompts a stern rebuke from Alex. He says, the seeds of Adi Phoebe have been planted in the rest of the cabbies' minds. And this elicits a slow, zombie-like chant of Adi Phoebe from the cabbies, including all of the extras as Louis cowers in his cage and pulls the shades down. It's actually a funny moment.
Oh, I loved it. I wanted there to be an actual revolution at that point. I wanted it to be like wild in the streets. I wanted the tires to be on fire and rolling out of the garage. I wanted the B-roll to look like the apocalypse. Cabs like careering crazily through the streets, running over pedestrians. That's what I'm talking about.
Well, we don't see that, but we do cut to a B-roll shot of a New York street. To your earlier point in the last episode, There's snow all over the place. It looks like winter has come to Sunshine
We
Town,
didn't see
right?
that? Is that what you're saying? We didn't see the apocalypse?
No, sadly, no, but there's a little bit of snow, so maybe that qualifies in some people's books.
Instead they cut to a B-roll we've already seen from last year.
That's true. With that weird, I think it's supposed to be like a sidewalk shovel machine. It's like the steam engine
Yeah.
rolling down the street. Yeah, that's the same one. You're right.
I in fact remember that it was that Jeffrey Tambor episode.
Yeah, we didn't like that episode
Yeah.
very much, as I recall.
No, and I don't like this B-roll.
There's something about the winter that makes it all the more oppressive to me.
I absolutely agree with you. It flashes me back to living in the Northeast with you. It depresses me seeing the snow and seeing everyone have to like trundle in and out in their overcoats.
Some of us are still out here.
Granted, at this moment, I would like to live at the center of an ice cube because it's been a summer of 110 degrees every day. Even though, HB, I did remark last season how proud I was of the show that they committed to winter, whereas most shows will only give us a winter episode when it's a Christmas episode, and then it's right back to the eternal summer.
I think we've expressed admiration for the fact that they're able to sell the idea that it's cold, even though this show is obviously being produced in beautiful, sunshiny California. But it's less about the B-roll, and it's more about when you see like Bobby hustle in to the garage and he's got gloves on, and he's rubbing his hands for warmth, and he's blowing on his hands for warmth. That to me is selling it without making me feel depressed about the prospect of winter. Because here we are, fall is almost upon us here in the Northeast, and soon enough it will be winter again. I'll be back in the midst of all that cold and trundling around and all that kind of stuff. We cut to Latka talking to Alex, and Latka confesses to Alex that he wants to go back to fight for the revolution. Side note, this is all interesting considering that we learned from Mama Gravis that Latka's father was actually a policeman in his country. He was actually one of the oppressors, not someone who is a revolutionary fighter. I guess somehow Latka developed a rebellious streak at some point. I don't know. What do you make of that?
Wait, I thought he was going to fight for the opposition.
No, he's fighting for the rebels. That's what he wants to fight for in this episode.
Okay, so he's going to fight. Oh, right, because they're going to fight the tyrannical despot.
The tyrannical despot. That's really the answer, because there's no government that they're fighting against. They're fighting against the tyranny of a despot. But at the same time, again, his father was one of the oppressors. I just thought it was interesting that clearly Latka's had a change of heart at some point being in New York.
Well, kids rebel against their parents, right?
Sure. Alex tries in vain to get Latka to look at both sides of the dilemma, his loyalty to his homeland versus his love of his new home in New York. But this only serves to really frustrate Latka. He walks away muttering that he might as well be talking to his wrench, which I think is really funny. I love seeing Latka drop the sweet, good-natured act and mutter to himself about what a jerk that guy is. I just think it's funny.
It's great to see the real Latka every once in a while,
So at that point, a spiffy dressed bearded man comes in. He's speaking stilted English. He's looking for Latka. This man, as we'll discover, is named Bashi, and he's played by an actor named Lenny Baker. Did you know anything about Lenny Baker, Father Malone?
No, and I don't want to.
Well, I'm going to tell you about him. Thank you for asking. He was an up-and-coming actor. It's actually a very tragic story that I'm going to tell you.
Oh, then I'm very interested.
Well, here we go. He was an up-and-coming young actor whose biggest role up to this point was 1976's Next Stop, Greenwich Village. Do you remember this movie?
I do.
Paul Mazursky. Baker starred along Christopher Walken. Ellen Greene was in this movie. Shelley Winters. Even an uncredited turn by future Taxi guest star Vincent Schiavelli. He was in this movie as well. It's like a coming of age in, I think it's like the 50s, New York. And Lenny Baker was the star. He was the main character of this movie. And Mazursky was, this might have been his first movie.
Sounds about right. Sounds autobiographical.
I haven't watched the movie, but I did watch the trailer prior to recording this episode, and it looks like a nice little slice of life, like a Brighton Beach memoir kind of a movie, right? But sadly, this guest spot on Taxi would be the last credit for Baker. He would die of AIDS-related cancer in 1982 at age 37. So very young.
Wow.
He might have been one of the higher profile early AIDS-related deaths at that time. 82 was super early for AIDS, was it not?
It was.
So
Not high profile though. I mean, now I feel bad saying how bad he is in this episode, but he's terrible here. But go ahead.
he's cartoonish. All right, there's no getting around
Oh,
that.
you think? He wandered in from the Popeye set, it feels like.
Fair enough.
He feels like the after the split from the duo of Yakov Smirnov and what's his name, whatever his character's name would be. Like, you know what I mean? He seems like Yakov's straight man or buffoon, one or the other.
I don't think you can pin it on him. I think this is a very cartoonish episode, and I think
No, I can blame it on him because it is a cartoonish episode, but all of the humor is derived from gibberish and physical comedy. And this guy's bad at both. His suit was ill-fitting and he stood in a weird stance.
Well, the suit being ill-fitting is perfect for the character because he's basically like a guy who is working at a car wash. He doesn't have a lot of money, so I don't blame him for having an ill-fitting suit. Latka and Bashi greet each other excitedly, and they have this bizarre choreographed dance followed by some Latka language.
You can tell they fucking rehearsed one time.
It is very awkward.
He's looking for the cues from Andy Kaufman, what to do next.
Yeah. Side note, while this whole exchange is going on, looking on behind them, it's behind this motor oil dispenser. Who do we see, Father Malone? It's Richard Sakai. I love seeing Richard Sakai back there. I'm not even going to call him Captain Marvel anymore. This is Richard Sakai. I'm sure of it. So Latka introduces Bashi to the rest of the cabbies, and clearly no fool, Bashi spends a little extra time flirting with Elaine, as any red-blooded man would be wont to do at that point. Bashi goes on to explain that he came over to the U.S. with Latka at the same time, but he went to Hollywood instead of New York. He would to become a movie producer, but he just ended up working at a car wash instead. Elaine asks him what he's doing in New York, and Bashi explains that he's going back to fight for the revolution and he's taking Latka with him, which is a little presumptuous, I think, but what are you going to do?
Well, you know what? The Latka he left, Latka's home country.
Homeworld.
that guy probably, did not want to leave and was homesick and stuff. So he probably remembers Latka being very pro Latka's home country.
In the intervening years, clearly Latka has he's grown to love New York and he's grown to love America.
I also am now really appreciating that they've never named Latka's home country because I'm having a good time saying Latka's home country.
Latka tries to explain to Bashi that he's an American now, but Bashi is having none of it. He says he's still, insert Latka's home country, on the inside. And just when Latka is ready to tell Bashi once and for all that he's staying in New York, Bashi launches into what I can only assume is the national anthem of Latka's home country. This stirs Latka's nationalism, and he decides to go ahead and fight and evidently we find out that he's actually a general. Latka is a general in his country's army. So Latka and Bashi march in lockstep out of the garage as we fade to black. It's a quick side note. Taxi co-creator Stan Daniels wrote the words and the music to Latka's national anthem. Another little tidbit for you, Father Malone.
So he's to blame. Okay, got it.
As you cross a name off of a list, he's to blame.
I'll be getting him. I'm adding him to a list.
So we fade into Mario's, or rather, we have another fun directorial choice here. It's a zoomed in image of a window with snow furiously falling in the background.
Yeah, I
And then we
loved it.
zoom out. Yeah, we zoom out and we're in Mario's. We didn't know that initially, but now we're in Mario's as it's snowing like crazy outside.
They learned their lesson from that fucking Bobby Wheeler episode as far as the dribble, dribble, drop. We've got a full on snowstorm going on here.
The dribble, dribble, drop was somebody just wantonly throwing snow at the window.
Yeah. Yeah, those machines that should have shake back and forth, like letting
It
out
is.
the kernels. And
Like I think of Peter Brady in that Brady Bunch episode where you get the box of detergent flakes and it's supposed to be snowing at Valley Forge. They're making the movie about George Washington, right?
yeah,
And yeah, it's much more a constant stream of snow falling. It looked despite that, it looked in no way natural the way it was coming down. It looked completely artificial. But
yeah.
you know,
There's nothing they can do about that. At least it doesn't look like there's just a snowman off camera sneezing every once in a while.
yeah. So the cabbies are all in Mario's with Latka, and Latka is dressed in a brown military uniform. And behind the bar is a giant banner that reads, "Good luck, Latka." Latka is bemoaning the fact that everybody's there except for Louis, which I think is sweet and actually sad because all we've really seen of Louis up to this point is being abusive towards Latka in a variety of ways, including this very episode. He let him go home if he docked him a day's worth of pay. After making a toast to Latka, Latka mingles a little bit, and Elaine wonders if there's anything they can do to keep him there. We'll see. She's very worried about Latka. But Alex says trying to keep Latka there will only make him feel worse. Tony, unfortunately, relates an off-color story about some friends he had in Vietnam that is frankly not worth repeating here, and I'm just going to leave it at that. Elaine goes over to Latka and tries to convince him not to go, and she sits him down and explains how worried they are for him and that they wouldn't consider him a coward if he stayed, but Latka says his troops need him. Tony pipes in and says he congratulates Latka on being a general at such a young age. And this is our first clue that maybe their army in Latka's home country isn't all it's cracked up to be. Latka says that being a general is the easy part. The hard part is being a living general. Vaudeville. So it feels to me like if anyone who knows Star Trek, the Klingons, they all like advance in rank when they kill their superiors. But I think in Latka's case, it's the reverse. You only advance because your superiors keep getting killed and you keep getting pushed forward despite any aptitude you had for the job. So a little worried for Latka myself, not going to lie.
Corporal Hicks. Same principle. Your entire squad gets wiped out by aliens. Your corporal suddenly is your leader.
To be fair, Hicks was a born leader. He was the next man up.
Well, look, he was certainly capable, but I don't think he wants the gig.
No, but some people have greatness thrust upon them. And
who could use Corporal Hicks? Latka's home country.
They might have had a chance, as we'll find out. The odds are looking pretty slim. Everyone gets a morose look on their faces all at once. I think they all realize that this could really happen. Latka could very well die while he's fighting for his country. To try and cheer everyone up, Latka pulls out a couple of bottles of Brefnish from his home country. This is his alcohol. Although we did see there was an episode where was it the what episode did we see?
He brings it to a party.
That's right.
Burns in his girlfriend's house. Was that it?
That might have been it. He did have an alcohol which poured like maple syrup. It was disgusting. This is not that. This looks like green scope or something. It's disgusting.
It looks like the fluid from Reanimator.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah. He pulls out these two bottles of Brefnish, and Alex grabs one and takes a big swig and falls backwards cartoon style. The only thing missing, Father Malone, was like smoke coming out of his ears, right?
Yeah, and that like sort of clobbering sound when he hits the ground. That blah, blah, blah,
right. Well, I think we can agree it's neither Alex's nor Judd Hirsch's finest moment. So let's get past it. We cut back to Mario's at some time later, and Latka and the cabbies are doing some kind of folk square dance in the middle of the restaurant. They've pushed all of the tables, so there's a big dance floor they've created.
They're using the traditional tablecloths.
Yeah, the red and white tablecloths. They formed
From
a
Latka's country. That's the tradition there.
it's
They dance with red and white check tablecloths.
it is pretty funny just because Kaufman has this funny look on his face as because what they've done is the cabbies are surrounding him and they're each holding an end of a tablecloth in their hands. So they've effectively encircled Latka while he's dancing in the middle, waving his own tablecloth in the air and pulling funny faces. And then each cabbie takes a turn in the center of this ring and they do a little dance. I think of course Bobby shows off by doing like a split or something. He does he does a handstand. That's what he does, right?
Yeah. Yeah, this is great.
He does a little handstand, and Elaine does the same kind of moves she did in the apartment where she drops, kind of like what did you call
Yeah,
it?
it's not great. She should stop
No,
doing that move.
it's like a proto twerk, what she
Yeah,
does.
yeah, right. It's a twerk without any of the twerking. So it's just sort of a squat. And if she's on a pedestal above everybody, then it's sexy. If she's in the middle of a room with people dancing around her with tablecloths and she squats down, and then it looks like they're just trying to block the view so she can pee.
Even Alex, who has apparently recovered from his breathness swig, he jumps around like a madman waving this tablecloth. The remarkable thing isn't that this is happening at all, but it feels like this dance because there's an accordion player playing folk music, and this feels like it goes on, Father Malone. No kidding, for like 20 minutes because they're just sitting here dancing and dancing and dancing. Then one guy goes in the middle, then Elaine.
Was this inspired by that fucking sequence from The Deer Hunter, like right before they go off to Vietnam, that fucking party that never ends? That's what it felt
That's a good
like.
call. That is a really good call because you can almost admire the balls of them to take a pretty hefty chunk of a 25-minute episode and just devote it to folk music and dancing because there's no dialogue. It's just them dancing around like madmen. As a viewer, I'm tired of it pretty quickly. The dance finally climaxes. Everyone catches their breath. Then Louis finally arrives. He acts rather coldly to Latka. He claims he only came down to give Latka his severance pay. It's kind of weird. Louis sort of grouses about Latka. He's running out on both the company and America. Like, when did Louis become such a patriot? It seemed odd. What did you think?
He is a veteran.
That's true. We did find that out about Louis, didn't we?
He just doesn't want Latka to leave. He's playing every angle. That this is prime Louis De Palma here. He wants to get his way, and he'll use every means to do it.
Well, and this actually brings me to my favorite part of this episode. Louis is about to leave. And
Use him out.
Yeah, well, Louis says he's gonna leave, but he says I need to give you a piece of my mind. I'm gonna chew you out some more. So they go outside because ostensibly because Louis doesn't want to embarrass him in front of everybody as he dresses him down. And they go outside and they're silhouetted in the door of Mario's. And you can very clearly, you can hear it a little bit, but you can very clearly see, it might have actually worked better if you couldn't hear anything. You can see Louis talking, gesticulating to Latka, and it ends with him giving Latka a big hug. And it's all just silhouetted. You don't really hear, I think you might hear him say, "Take care of yourself, Latka." As sappy as this is, Father Malone, I think it might be my favorite moment of the episode. I do like it when Louis upends expectations and proves that he does have a heart in the midst of all of his monstrosity. And I don't know, I found it moving. What did you think of that moment?
How did I know that you were going to be affected by this moment?
Because I'm sappy.
No, because it's a great moment. My favorite moment of the episode as well. This one stuck with me. In fact, I did not remember this episode at all until he said, "Come outside with me. I'm not done chewing you out." And I immediately flashed back to that moment, to the silhouetted hug, seeing this as a kid and feeling as I felt then, that what a great moment between Louis and Latka. That moment, in fact, is in the end is going to elevate this by a yellow light for me.
Latka walks in. He's crying from the emotion of the hug that Louis just gave him. Elaine makes her own tear-filled toast to Latka. And then Bobby, of course, being this actor, he quotes Anthony and Cleopatra to Latka to commemorate his bravery. Very hammy, but again,
Totally in character.
Yeah.
And I thought Latka coming back and crying was him fake crying, like he had just been read the riot act by Louis. I didn't think he was crying because he had been moved.
I don't think Latka is capable of that kind of subterfuge. I just think Latka was so moved by the display of affection from Louis that he couldn't help crying. I think the crying
unless Louis said, now when you go back in there, you got to pretend like you're crying, like I was really yelling at you out here.
That's possible too. I don't know if they had enough time based on how quickly the moment comes and goes. Alex also makes a toast to Latka's homeland and his safe return. And finally, Latka makes his own toast to his American friends. He expresses his love for everyone. And it's a very sweet little moment. But just then, your favorite guest star, Bashi, and a motley crew of other soldiers file in to Mario's to get Latka to go. Latka says his goodbyes to everybody. It's a little like the Wizard of Oz, where each person in turn gets a hug from him. Elaine tells Latka that she'll write him every day and asks if Latka can draw a map of the country. This is kind of an odd bit here.
A very odd bit.
Yeah. It's all of a sudden like this bit with the chalkboard. Tommy, your favorite TJ Castronova, guest star.
TJ Castronova. He's the showrunner of Tales from the Dark Side.
He grabs a chalkboard from the back, and Bashi draws the map of Latka's home country. And as he draws the map, he's filling in where the rebels are and where the forces of the tyrannical despot are. And it's becoming clear to everybody in the bar that the rebels are hopelessly outnumbered by the government troops. And Latka, realizing this, tells Bashi in the perfect Latka fashion to kiss his yaktabe. And he's going to go home to watch The Tonight Show, which immediately dates this episode, if nothing else, because nobody says anymore, I'm going to rush home and watch The Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon. Nobody does it. This was the time of Johnny Carson where The Tonight Show was must-watch TV. So a joke like that could play, right?
Well, I mean, it's The Tonight Show. You could say it up until streaming.
What, that it was must-watch TV?
That people are going to go home and watch it.
I don't know how many people were that excited to watch Jay Leno on The Tonight Show. Were you?
Clearly, thousands of old people were dying to watch Jay Leno week in and week out.
I suppose, but I wouldn't call Latka an old person. He wanted to. What? Was that a Jay Leno? Hey, what are you doing there?
Hey, a couple of years now.
By the way, side note, do you know, in my opinion, who did the best Jay Leno impression?
Judd Apatow.
Chris Elliott. Did you ever see Chris Elliott do Leno on
yeah.
Letterman?
Yeah, we did with prosthetics and everything, right?
Yeah. He had the chin. It was great.
Yeah.
There's a sketch on YouTube, and I'm going to cut to it right now, as a matter of fact, of here's Chris Elliott doing Leno on Letterman.
So I brought the TV guide with me. No evil twins this week,
But take a look at these mind teethers in the crossword puzzles over here.
Yeah?
Now look at this. This is 48 across. It's a TV show, 4 letters, Miami blank. Oh, I don't know. Florida? What are we, morons? Are we morons?
I would encourage you to check out, there's an episode of The Ben Stiller Show where they're doing auditions for The Tonight Show. Most of it is garbage, except for Judd Apatow, who's not a performer on the show, in makeup, does a Jay Leno that's fucking killer.
I tell a joke. That's all I do. I tell jokes. I don't do the tea time theater. I'm just, I tell jokes. I'm the home friends. Did you read the paper today? I mean, this is what I do. It's pretty simple, really.
So Bashi comes in with these troops, and he leads the rest of the troops in the country's anthem, which again is rousing Latka's patriotism, and he's now conflicted once again. But the cabbies, what do they counter with Father Malone? What do they start singing?
They counter with the George M. Cohan classic, Yankee Doodle Dandy. Yankee Doodle Do or die.
They're trying to drown out the soldiers. And Alex does this thing where he brandishes this map that spells doom for the rebellion. And he goes from troop to troop, and everyone he shows this. It's like something out of the Yellow Submarine when they're in Pepperland and all of a sudden everybody's coming back to life. Every troop that he shows this thing to immediately decides not to go fight for the country, and they go over to the American side, which I thought was sort of silly.
You know, what's funny is I also thought of a Beatles related thing. I thought of that Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band movie, the Steve Martin segment, the Dr. Maxwell, where they're going from person to person, going zap, 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 and they turn from like basket cases into Hitler Youth.
That's right. And there was another bit in that movie at the end when Billy Preston is singing Get Back, and he's shooting lasers out of his fingers, and he brings back Strawberry Fields from the dead, and he shoots Mr. Mustard and he becomes the Pope. Do you remember that?
Oh, yeah.
There's a lot of
How can I
weird
forget?
transformations going on in that movie.
Yeah. Not as interesting as a chalkboard, but they do what they can here at Sunshine Cab.
Finally, only Bashi is left to advocate for his country, and he blows his whistle. He has a whistle around his neck and he blows it to stop the singing. And you think he's going to make some sort of pronouncement about his country or what have you. But all he does is he finishes the Yankee Doodle stanza and he tap dances his way over to the American side, and everybody cheers. Hey, they convinced everybody to stay in America, and that's a good thing.
You can tell that by the applause.
So that
Can I
is
just say, this episode got me thinking about nationalism and got me thinking about Friedrich Nietzsche, who thought all nationalism was garbage. Like, it ultimately divides us, even if it gives us a sense of pride. And he was a man who would, at dinner parties, play piano until his fingers bled. So you can trust him. That's all. Continue.
So that's the episode. That is Latka's Revolting. Now we're going to talk about yellow lights.
What does a yellow light mean?
Reminder, we're going to score this episode from 1 to 5 yellow lights. 1 yellow light is the worst taxi episode. 5 is the best. And as is also our custom, we're going to kick it over to Father Malone. Father Malone, what do you give? How many yellow lights do you give Latka's Revolting?
I give Latka's Revolting 3 yellow lights asterisk.
3? Well, first of all, what's the asterisk about?
It's a 2 yellow light episode that gets another yellow light because the scene of affection between Latka and Louis is powerful enough to rate its own light.
Well, I disagree. I gave this 2 yellow lights. One of those is purely because of that moment between Latka and Louis. Look, it's always interesting to have more of Latka's blanks filled in, like about his country and everything. But this is a little bit of overload. It shades too much into the cartoonish. And as much as I want to appreciate Lenny Baker and his performance, it's far too cartoonish for this. Latka himself is a bit of a cartoon, and I don't really love the two of them playing off of each other.
By cartoonish, do you mean terrible?
I didn't think Baker was as bad as you did. And any shortcomings, I'm going to attribute to the writing. But, it's a difference of opinion. What are you going to do? Latka-centric episodes, this is you roll the dice. There's always something fun in store, but sometimes it's a little too wacky. And that's what we're seeing here. And again, as I said in the previous episode, this is not really an episode that I would revisit all that much anyway. So for that reason and others, I'm giving it 2 yellow lights. So 2 from me, 3 from Father Malone. That will do it for this episode of Night, Mr. Walters. Father Malone, where can folks find you when you're not clocked into the garage?
Check out my podcast, Midnight Viewing. It's a twice a week podcast. You can get on all their podcatchers. I also do a show called Dark Destinations. It's radio drama, write and produce, and HP does the music for. Hey, by the way, HP does the music for everything I do. He's pretty amazing, so go check him out as well.
Well, thank you. Appreciate that. No, it's fun. I also can be found in some of the nooks and crannies of the Weirding Way Media galaxy of shows, in addition to this very fine podcast. I occasionally do guest spots on the Culture Cast with Chris Dashew. Father Malone mentioned Dark Destinations. Again, I would encourage anybody who likes good radio drama, good storytelling, great production. It's fantastic. I love it. You should check it out. I also have a Bandcamp site, hpmusicplace.bandcamp.com. Please check that out as well. So once again, thank you so much for listening. Please feel free to subscribe to the podcast, write a review, or rate us. We'd love to hear from you in any manner you see fit. So for myself and for Father Malone, thanks again, and we'll see you all next time.